Good afternoon and good morning to all of you. Welcome to Prysmian Group 2021 Sustainability event. This is an extremely important moment in our stakeholders engagement program. Allow me first of all to thank you all for the time you are dedicating to us today, tomorrow, and the day after, giving us the opportunity to share with you our sustainability ambitions, achievements, and to listen to your voice is an extremely important privilege, which is core in the constant update of our sustainability priorities. Sustainability is in what we do, is part of what we are. We have the privilege to lead a sector which plays a strategic role in the fight against the climate change, but we also feel the responsibility to play a proactive role. We engage with our customers on a regular basis to make sure that we serve them in the best way possible, in the short and in the long run. We engage with our suppliers. We deem extremely relevant to drive the decarbonization of our supply chain, but also to share ESG KPIs. We integrate our ESG KPIs in the selection process of our suppliers, and the constant engagement with customers and suppliers drive our innovation, the innovation in our supply chain. We engage with our shareholders. As a full public company, the voice of the investors is core, is strategic, also to nurture their trust and to increase our credibility. We play in 9 regions, 55 countries, through 108 plants and 26 R&D centers, promoting the social and economic development of the communities where we do operate. Is part of what we do every day. It's our core responsibility, and we are very focused on the less favored, the underprivileged communities. I'm not leaving people at the end because they are less important, but because they are at the core of our sustainability. There can't be any sustainable growth without people at the center. In Prysmian, we strive every day to create a safe, diverse, inclusive working environment where we engage constantly with all our 30,096 colleagues to make also sure that meritocracy is at the basis of our human capital management policies and actions. Prysmian's sustainability journey started decades ago, especially if you think about the business where we do operate. And thanks to the engagement with you, we have been able to launch extremely relevant initiatives. Allow me to mention just a few of them. We launched the side-by-side, the first diversity and inclusion initiative back in 2016. We started connecting ESG to remuneration in 2018. In 2020, we established a dedicated board committee. We also identified ESG as a core skill in the board skill matrix ahead of the renewal of the board in 2021. 2021 has been extremely important for Prysmian. We have been launching the climate ambition with the approval of our science-based targets for our 2035 net zero year. We have been launching our social ambition. We are overwhelmed by the result of the last Dow Jones Sustainability Index, where Prysmian recorded the highest score in the sector. But of course, we are taking all of these with great humbleness and humility to make sure that we continue to improve. The voice of the investors is part of what we do every day. We have a diverse, inclusive shareholders base where all shareholders are minority shareholders. We have over 300 institutional investors, thousands of retail investors, 10,000 of which it's us, it's Prysmian employees. The top management is a shareholder of the company, and this for us a push for increasing the transparency, the accuracy, to nurture the trust of our investors. And over the years, we have been seeing the growing role of ESG investors, to the point that as of today, almost 1 out of 2 investors are ESG driven. And this is, of course, a guarantee of the high level of sensitivity that we have on these topics. For Prysmian, sustainability is a 360 approach. We care about the environment, and our Chief Operating Officer, Massimo Battaini, will share with us what Prysmian is doing on this. Of course, the social responsibility is strategic, and our Chief HR Officer, Fabrizio Ruchman, will talk to us today and also tomorrow during the workshop about what we are doing on the social dimensions in the long run and concretely in the short run. There can't be sustainability without innovation, so sustainability is a key driver of our innovation approach. And today we will have the honor to listen directly from the voice of one of our main customers, Terna, how relevant is the role of the energy infrastructure in the energy transition context. How do we make sure that we translate ambitions, goals into actions and behaviors? Sustainability is at all levels in Prysmian. It's at the board level. We will have the pleasure today to listen directly from the voice of the chairperson of the committee, Maria Letizia Mariani, how the board is putting sustainability on top of the agenda. But we'll also have the involvement of the other two board committees members, Ines Comse and Mimi Kung, in the workshop tomorrow and the day after. We have a dedicated steering committee on sustainability where we include all the main functions and also regional CEOs. We have a dedicated diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, which works hand in hand with the steering committee on sustainability. We have a diversity and inclusion and equity director since 2019. In each region, we have a sustainability ambassador to make sure that our voice reaches the local communities and also to listen directly from the voice of the communities. And the same applies to the business. We have sustainability ambassador in each business, for each business, to make sure that we are able to tailor sustainability to the specific requirements of the business. And all this governance is aimed at making sure that we translate ambitions, goals into actions, into behaviors, to drive the sustainable growth of our company, remaining simple and humble to continue to learn and to continue to improve. I'll thank you again for being with us today, and I'll now hand you over to Andrea, which will walk us through the agenda of the day.
Well, Maria Cristina, thanks for having me. Hello, congrats for your opening remarks, and it's a pleasure being with you. A warm hello from Milan to everyone listening.
Thank you, Andrea.
Now, it's an honor for me to anchor this event. It's going to be a plenary session divided in 8 different sessions. We're going to have keynote speeches, presentation, roundtable. The speakers will include Prysmian board members, top management, local leaders that will share their vision and best practices. But we're going to have also the point of view of stakeholders, and more specifically, the investors that give a price day in, day out to Prysmian and its sustainability strategy. So it's not going to be just an internal discussion with internal point of view, but also an external with international experts. And this is exactly the way we are already ready to kick off the event. Let's go. So our first speaker at the Prysmian Sustainability Day is Professor Carlo Carraro. Carlo Carraro is IPCC Vice Chair, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations, and is President Emeritus and Professor of Environmental Economics at University Ca' Foscari in Venice. Welcome, Professor.
Good afternoon. Glad to be with you.
Well, Professor, let me start with your recent work at IPCC, because when you published your latest report, it was August, the UN Secretary General said this is a red code for humanity. I don't know if COP26 listened fully to your alert, but at the same time, can you please remind us what are the main evidence of this report, which is not just a journalistic headline, it's one milestone in scientific research on climate change?
Yes, you're right. For the first time, we have some certainties that in previous report that didn't show up. The main certainty is that the origin of climate change is human behavior. In all previous report, this statement was likely or very likely. For the first time this year, it's undisputable that humans are the origin of climate change. But before giving a look to the future, our planet, of our societies, let's have a look to the past. It is important to get the sense of urgency which is behind the action that we should undertake to control climate change. And I think that if you give a look to this slide that represents both carbon dioxide concentration and global temperature in the last 60 million years, you immediately get the idea of how different is the situation with respect to what we had in the past, I mean, at least in the recent past. Because as you can see clearly here, if we want to get the same level of carbon dioxide concentration, we need to go back at least 10 million years. If we want to get the same level of temperature increase, we need to go back at least 3 million years. And of course, this situation is a situation of high risk, of high uncertainties for humanities who never lived in such an environment. From the start of human beings, we never experienced this kind of environment, this kind of climate. And we reduce the length to 10,000 years. Again, we get the same kind of picture. In the last 10,000 years, the level of temperature, this is temperature, never reached the plus 1.1 degrees with respect to the global average that we have today on Earth. You see, we had several oscillations. We have increase and decrease of temperature, but we never reached the amount of concentration of greenhouse gases and the level of temperature that we have today. And this inevitably leads to a situation of high risk. This statement is taken, as you said, from the recent IPCC report. And this statement, which has been approved by all 197 countries belonging to the UNFCCC, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, is clear. We had rapid changes in climate, and these changes are widespread, and they are intensifying and unprecedented in 1,000 years. It's a risky situation, and we need to address the situation with concrete, measure, ambitious, and quick changes of our behavior. And not for the planet, but for ourselves. I mean, the big changes are economic ones. Climate change is already an economic problem with huge economic impacts. There are many indicators and many analyses, in particular from insurance companies, that clearly show how much damages from climate change have increased in the last years. But in this slide, I just summarize by giving a number that comes from a recent study by colleagues from the University of California at Berkeley. And already today, already now, 0.25%, 0.25% of GDP is lost because of climate change worldwide. It's a worldwide average with a lot of variability because temperatures is highly variable. And for example, we have a target, the Glasgow target, that was the Paris target, no more than 2 degrees, no more than 1.5 degrees. But that target is an average one, but Europe is already 2.2 above the average, and Scandinavian countries are +3, and in the Arctic, temperatures has increased by 4.5 degrees in the last 100 years. So changes are widespread, uneven, and are affecting mostly the most vulnerable regions. So the regions that are really weak ones, the poor ones, are the most affected by climate change. And the expected loss in the coming year is even bigger, even in Europe, which is a lucky region of the planet. Even in Europe, the loss coming from climate change related events, extreme events or other kind of situations related to climate change is going to reach 2.5% of GDP unless we act immediately with emission reduction measures and unless we develop ways to adapt to climate change, because in any case, some changes will occur. We will not be able to control completely climate change, and we need to adapt to what is going to happen into the future. What are these main changes coming from climate change? You can see them from this slide. Temperature change, for example, will reach 1.5 whatever the emission scenario. This is something that's been neglected by negotiators in Glasgow, but it is very clear in the IPCC report. A report, by the way, approved again by all countries. So there is a sort of contradiction, because in any case, we are going to reach 1.5. The hope we have is to stay over there. In the best case, we will be able to remain at the 1.5 level, but most likely we will move on and reach 1.8, possibly 2, and emission reductions, ambitious emission reduction may be able to stabilize temperature increase at about 2 degrees on average, and no more than 2 degrees, if successful. At the moment, we are not on that pathway. At the moment, temperature increase is predicted to be 3 degrees. I mean, if all countries comply with the Paris Agreement and with the commitments adopted in Paris, signed, agreed upon in Paris, the temperature increase will be 3 degrees, and there is wide consensus on this kind of estimate. Second, the Arctic will be practically ice-free in September, at least once before 2050. Again, this is going to open new opportunities, in particular for logistics and shipping, but certainly from an environmental viewpoint, the Arctic free of ice will imply an increase of sea level, as we will see, because there will be more water, not really because of the Arctic, mostly because of Greenland and the Antarctic, because the Arctic melting is just thermal expansion with moderate impact on sea level rise. The third one is the increase of extreme events. So the recurrence of extreme events will be unprecedented. Sea level events, in particular, will be much higher than in the past. This is something we are experiencing in Italy. They take Venice as an example, or many other, or in Genoa and the regions beyond it. But certainly, this is one of the major threats of climate change. And then fires in the summer, and scarcity of water and food in those regions of the planet where water and food are already scarce. And this is going to increase the problems that we already have with migration flows. Just a few pictures to give you an idea. This is what, in the bottom part, you see what would happen with a 1.5 global warming. And you see that most of the warming will be in the North Hemisphere. With a 2 degree global warming, the center one of the bottom part, you see that the warming will be mostly in the Northern Hemisphere, but quite severe. I mean, it will be 5 degrees more than the present level. And of course, with 4 degree increase on average, the increase of temperature will be widespread all over the planet. But we hope not to get there. We are not on the track to get to 4 degrees. We're on the track to get to 3, and 2 is what we hope to achieve in this century. Let's give a look to changes in precipitation. This one is what would happen with a 1.5, 2 degrees, and 4 degrees in terms of precipitation. And you see that some regions will become drier, and other regions will become wetter. And the drier regions, unfortunately, include the Mediterranean regions. In all these diagrams, you see that the loss of precipitation will be focused mostly in the Mediterranean region, even with 2 degrees. So the threats for our countries, in particular countries in the Mediterranean region, is more relevant. That as far as precipitations are concerned, is more relevant than in other regions of the world. I was mentioning sea level rise. Here are the predictions, and you see that even in the best case, we will add 40 centimeters to the 20 that we already experienced in the last 25, that we already experienced in the last century. So even in the case in which, in the blue lines represent the cases in which we are able to keep temperature below 2 degrees, temperature increase below 2 degrees. Even in those cases, as you can see, sea level will increase, and will increase by an additional 35, 40 centimeters with respect to today, with impacts, important impacts on coastal zones. And again, Italy, which is a country with a huge amount of coastal zones will be ones of those with the highest impact. The other cases, yellow and red, are the ones with higher level of temperature, 3 or 4 degrees, and of course, the sea level will increase even more. But what I'm saying is that we already changed the climate, and some of the impacts will be unavoidable, which implies that it's urgent to avoid that these impacts get worse than what they already will be. The final one on impacts is on the frequency of extreme events. This one, as well as the other ones, is taken from the last IPCC report, the one that was published in August. And you see that the more temperature increase, the more extreme events will be frequent, in this case, hot extreme temperature. And even with 1.5 temperature increase, the frequency will be 4 times the frequency in the past. It will reach 5.6 times with 2 degrees and 9 times with 4 degrees. So even the frequencies of a 10-year event will increase a lot, and even worse for a 50-year event. A 50-year event is a really extreme hot event, and the frequency will increase even more for this kind of very rare events than the other ones. So pay attention, we need to intervene on both sides, reducing emissions to avoid even worse situation, and adapt, prepare to climate changes, because some of them will be unavoidable. But the speed of mitigation is crucial. I think this is really important. The time that we lost in the past, because we know that the problem exists and measures should be taken for at least 40, 45 years. But the time we lost in the past has a very important implication, which is the accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere that it's very difficult to remove. And the only way for the moment is to increase the speed of emission reduction. We need to reduce emission more quickly than what we did in the past. Just to give you the size of what happened in Europe, for example, which is the best of the countries or the regions in the world from this viewpoint, emissions were reduced from 1990 to 2020 by 20%. So in 30 years, 20%. Now, in another 30 years, we need to reach minus 55. So another 35% in 30 years. So the speed of reduction must be at least 2 times the speed of reduction that we had in the past. And this is a very challenging task to achieve, because the energy system in particular, but all societies and all the economic systems must change to take into account to achieve this kind of objective. This is again what the IPCC predicts in terms of emission pathways. The yellow one shows the Paris Agreement, what is the pathway of emissions implicit in the Paris Agreement. And the blue ones, the light blue and the dark blue, shows what would happen in the case of a 1.5 degree target and a 2 degree target. In the case of the Paris Agreement, as we know, as I showed you before, the temperature increase, which is predicted, is 3 degree temperature increase. But as you can see, emissions to achieve 1.5 should go to 0 by, say, 2060 on average. That's why developing countries are committing to net zero in 2050, and developing are committing to net zero in 60 or 70 in the case of India. But the goal is to go to net zero by 2060, and then to negative emissions. What are negative emissions? And it's clear that both in the dark blue and the light blue pathway, emission must become negative in the second half of the century. That means that emissions should be not only zeroed, I mean, you will get to 0 in terms of flow of emissions, but you must be able to remove some of the past emissions, some of the emissions that are in the atmosphere because they have been emitted in the past. And we need to develop this kind of technology. We need to develop a technology which enables us to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, to capture CO2 from the atmosphere. It's not urgent. We have a bit of time, because for the moment we need to reduce and strongly reduce emissions. But in the meantime, technological progress must be developed to get this kind. We need this kind of technology if we want to remain at below 2 degrees. So summing up, energy efficiency in all sectors, electrifications of transport, heating and industries, and decarbonization of electricity generation with renewable, hydrogen, nuclear. I mean, all these different technological options are important to achieve the objective. Energy efficiency, to reduce the amount of energy, energy per unit of production. Electrification, because this is the way in which we can get zero emissions if electricity is produced with renewables or nuclear or hydrogen. So this is these are the three pillars of the strategy, taking into account that now costs are much lower than 30 or 40 years ago. This is probably the only good reasons why a delay may have justification, because now cost of doing things, of reducing emissions, are much lower than 30 or 40 years ago. And here you have an example of 4 technologies: solar panel, electrolyzer, wind power, and batteries, electric for electric cars. And as you can see, the unit cost of these technologies have reduced a lot. I mean, it's much, much smaller than what it was. And this kind of low cost of the new technology, by the way, the solar panels, for example, in some countries, India is just a good example, are more than competitive. The cost of producing a unit of energy is lower than with fossil fuels. So the change, the transition is driven by economic reasons and not only by environmental one. I mean, there is an economic justification to move into this kind of technology simply because they cost less. So costs are an important dimension, but we need some enabling and accelerating factors. And these are the factors that I would like to emphasize. Technological innovation, as I said, digital transformation, finance, and of course, policy that must drive the change. The technology challenge is important and focuses mostly, as we said, on removing CO2, on storing electricity, because renewables are intermittent and we need to store the electricity produced through renewable to keep productions even when there is no sun or no wind, and new zero carbon sources like synthetic fuels or hydrogen. These are the basic technologies that we need more investment in R&D, and unfortunately, on average, this is not happening. On average, the investment in energy R&D have not increased above the level of the 80s, whereas we need a much, much bigger effort into this direction. Digital transformation is important because it enables changes in all sectors and in all technologies. Here you have a list of what you can do with digital transformation, but most importantly, in a recent study that I carried out with Ambrosetti, we identified both the direct and indirect impact of digital transformation into emission reduction processes. And as you can see here, digital transformation in itself alone can get a minus 70% of total emission in 2050, a net reduction of emissions in 2050, and an additional 35% is the enabling factor, the one that helps electric cars, smart cities, new production processes, and so on and so forth, that through digital transformation becomes both more efficient and more compatible, more sustainable, more compatible with the strategy to zero emissions in 2050. The third one is finance, and probably the financial challenge, and it was clear even in Glasgow, is the most important one. At the moment, it's the most relevant one. We need a lot of investments. Here you have some figures coming from some studies just to show that the amount of annual investments which are necessary for the energy and ecological transition have been increasing over time. The recent estimate by International Energy Agency, or the IPCC, is about 2,500 billion per year. Today, energy investments are about 1,600 billion, so the increase is about 1 trillion per year of investment in the energy sector, something which is affordable, but we need the commitments, the decision, and the role of the financial sector is very important. And this is probably good news coming from Glasgow, because in Glasgow, it was clear that the financial sector is ready to move very relevant, very important resources into this direction, and the economic incentives are there. And I don't have the time to talk about the recent report of the European Central Bank that is now introducing stress tests for banks, taking into account the threat of climate change. But this report clearly shows that there is an interest, an economic interest for the financial sector to support the ecological and energy transition. We are far from this kind of targets because the climate-related and energy-related investments today are about 800 billions per year. So about half of the 1,600 I mentioned before. Half of them go into the right direction, and the other half go into fossil fuels, so into the wrong direction. So the goal is twofold. On the one hand, redirect investments for all the investments to focus on renewables and other low carbon sources, and to increase this amount, because we need an increase at least for the next 10 years in order to achieve the target for the 2030 and for the 2050. And finally, policy in particular, COP26 in Glasgow confirmed that the main countries have conflicting interests and they find it difficult to commit to emission reduction. In particular, short-term ones. They're quite good in claiming that they are going to zero emissions 2050 or in 2060. So long-term goals are easier than short-term ones. Only Europe has clear short-term targets, minus 55 in 2030. The other countries, even the United States, have been unable to get the plan to reduce emission approved by the Congress. So it's a big problem to lead policy to send the right signals in the short term. In the long term, there are these signals, but for the next 10 years, and these next 10 years are crucial, we need more. And we need more in particular if governments cannot do their own job from companies that are active into the direction of reducing emissions. There were positive decisions in Glasgow, however, in particular on forest preservation. There were positive decisions on coal, in particular the commitment not to build new power plants abroad, new coal power plants abroad. This is an important decision taken by all major countries. A lot of bilateral agreements and company commitments, as I said before, and the Glasgow breakthrough. The Glasgow breakthrough is an agreement among the 30 most important countries in the world on the technologies. I think that it's important because it identifies the technologies that all major countries believe to be the most promising one, the ones on which we should focus for the next decade. And this is the list. Zero emission vehicles, renewables to produce clean power, and there are commitments on steel and low carbon hydrogen. I think that there is a list of technology and KPIs, performance indicators, very clear to identify the pathway toward these targets. So there are good news from Glasgow as well, even though, and this is my last slide, this is from the International Energy Agency, the gap between what is the commitment in Paris. Paris is only able to stabilize emissions. Glasgow pledges are important because they reduce, for the first time, they will be able to reduce emissions, but zero in 2050 is still far away, and we need more than what decided in Glasgow. And we must rely on technical change and company strategies. The commitments of companies very important to get to zero net emissions in 2050 or 60, which is what we need to get to control climate change for this and the coming centuries. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Carlo Carraro, for wrapping up the main evidence of the IPCC report. It's a gloomy, it's a scary outlook, but it's real. It's based on scientific data and analysis of the IPCC report, which highlights the sense of urgency, emergency. We need action, we need investment, we need technological breakthrough. The energy transition is one of the most effective ways to mitigate in a very short time the effect of this climate change that you just described. And this is what we're going to discuss in the next session. Thanks again, Professor.
Thank you.
Well, the challenges of climate change, the reaction of the industry, Prysmian point of view and outlook on all of this. We start talking this with Massimo Battaini, who's Prysmian Group Chief Operating Officer, which is the speaker that I invite to join me on the stage for entering in the midst of the life of the company and how is it looking at the future of all these topics. Please, Massimo, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I would like to tell you how the ESG initiative is going to impact the cable industry in the coming years, and how the ESG strategies Prysmian is going to be deployed across regions. First of all, I'm very happy to realize that finally the whole world has taken stock of this dramatic reality. Now, if you look at the CO2 trend over the last 60 years, you notice a significant surge in emission over the last 20. So sustainability has now become a really urgent and extremely urgent and universal concern, which we have to address. And this sense of urgency, the awareness of this climate change has become public in the opinion of the people and the stakeholders, shareholders, governments, and community. But despite this, we are still not taking all the actions needed to address it. I believe personally that the COP26 outcome, so the end of this conference, which was a couple of weeks ago, was not an outright success. So it was certainly difficult to clinch an agreement across 197 countries, each one of those with different peculiarities in terms of emissions, in terms of ambition to the net zero, in terms of economical development and energy generation. But so despite this, so the satisfactory, the answer for this COP26 was not satisfactory, but I still believe that the 1.5-degree pathway is within reach, although it is extremely challenging to achieve it. And so the net zero is the answer to the CO2 emissions. But the net zero goal requires a significant efforts in pushing this energy transition. So what is the energy transition about? It's about shifting from fossil energy to renewable sources, to wind and solar. And this shift has started already happening. We have seen a significant uptake in offshore capacity, offshore wind capacity, from 7 gigawatt hours installed in 2018 to the 27 gigawatt hours installed in 2021, up to 200 gigawatt hours, which is the target for 2030. And this number will go further up beyond 2030. But the shift to renewable sources might not be enough to guarantee the net zero. So we need to top it up with additional actions. So we need to complement this, resorting to other actions like the hydrogen. Hydrogen is an alternative resource to fossil fuel. It's also a way to produce electricity in a CO2-free emission way. New technology will also need to be developed in order to capture CO2. So it might not be enough to reduce the CO2 emission. We also have to complement this action with technology to reduce the quantity of CO2, to capture the CO2 emission from the atmosphere, from where the emissions are generated. Circular economy is also an important action to save resources and to save CO2 emissions in the first place. So energy transition is key to support the net zero goal. How we get there to the energy transition? We need definitely to strengthen, to upgrade, to enhance the cable networks, the infrastructure that our customers operate to transfer energy from one location to another. Why do we have to enhance this network? Because the generation of energy or renewable energy is far away from where the consumption is. So this need of connecting renewable generation with the consumption places is the need behind the incremental growth of the network activity. I'll give you an example, the German corridors. Now, we all know about this connection between the North Sea, where the offshore wind farms are generating renewable energy in Germany, and the southern of the country, where the highest consumption, where most of the consumption takes place. So there are thousands of kilometers of cables that are going to be deployed over the next 5 to 7 years to connect the north to the south. And this is what is behind the growth that we see in this cable market, growth following the energy transition requirements. The demand of new cables, new projects for energy transition will rise from 2.5 billion euro of demand in the last 5 years to 8 billion euros. So the growth is significant, it's very impressive. And this is not just a theory, it has happened. In 2020, in 2021, we've seen already this demand growing to 7 billion euros. So this is a solid and concrete demand which will change our way we do business in the cable industry. The role of Prysmian in this environment, what is it? We want to follow and support the energy transition trend. Not only do we want to follow the market trend in terms of additional demand ensuing from the energy transition, we also want to be the enabler of the transition. We want to lead this transition. And in order to do so, we have taken our action as a twofold action. We want on the one hand, we need on the one hand to be very brave and investing in capacity. We have deploying almost 500 million investment, 500 million euros worth of investment over the next 5 years to increase the capacity, the production capacity of our factories. We're also going to build a new submarine plant, brand new submarine plant in the United States to support the local demand in the United States. We also just acquired a new vessel, the Leonardo Da Vinci, which is a state-of-the-art vessel in terms of quantity of cable that this vessel can convey to the installation site, and in terms of laying capacity, in terms of laying capabilities. One of those being to be able to lay cable to a greater sea depth, so that some connections that were not foreseeable in the past could become real. On the other front, we're working on cable innovation. Cable innovation means to develop a new solution for cables to transmit more power, to transmit more voltage, to transmit more energy. So this is the way to contribute in a concrete way to making the energy transition financially more viable, more affordable from a cost point of view. Higher capacity of cables, monitoring of these grids is also a way to make these grids run in a more efficient way. So we thought that if we wanted to be credible in the role of being the enabler of the energy transition, we needed to do our homework ourselves. So we, as early as this year, we submitted our commitment to Science-Based Target Initiative. The approval came in September. What is this commitment about? Basically, we have two goals. We want to work on Scope 1, 2 emissions, which are the emissions associated to our production process, our factories, our distribution center, our offices, and drive this emission down by 46% by 2030, and in order to achieve the net zero goal by 2035, so well ahead of the overall requirement of 2050. In terms of Scope 3 emissions, the second goal, we are targeting the net zero by 2050. Let me make you more familiar with this decarbonization value chain. You see, Scope 1 and 2 are our own emissions. They account for 1 million tons of CO2 emitted every year in the atmosphere. Upstream, we have almost 6 million tons of CO2 that we incorporate in our footprint when we buy raw material from our suppliers. Downstream, we have 285 million tons of CO2, which are associated to our cables when they are run in operation by our customer during their overall life cycle, which is, depending on the product segment, an average of 30, 40, 50 years. So they will emit CO2 for a total amount of 285. So our footprint, our company is responsible for almost 300 million tons of CO2 emission per year. Every year we produce what we produce and sell, we create this 300 million worth of impact to the atmosphere. It's also important to notice that what we consider our Scope 3 downstream emissions, so the cable emitted, the cable emission in operation, are also coinciding with the Scope 1 and 2 of our customer, as well as Scope 3 upstream coincide with the Scope 1 and 2 of our suppliers. So this is important to notice because we are all together in this journey. And if you are all together in this journey, it is important that everybody, every one of us, do their own contribution to the net zero. And in order to make this overall contribution to net zero target more effective and efficient, we engaged. We spent this year many meetings, many times engaging with customers and suppliers in order to find us the way to help our customer to reduce the cable emission in operations, in order to understand the relevant and the mutual needs and be more effective in this energy transition and net zero goals. So at Prysmian, we have a global strategy in terms of sustainability, which covers the climate challenge, the social ambition, and safety. And as per all global strategy, for being effective and successful, they need to be deployed at the regional level. So we've done this in the group. We have deployed our global strategy at the regional level. Not only have we done this, we also have complemented this strategy. We also have enriched the strategy with the inputs coming from the local communities, coming from the diverse culture of the different regions, the different teams of people. And so this is why we believe that our strategy is very valuable. And this is actually why we believe that our sustainability strategy is extremely sustainable, is in the long term. So thank you for all this, and I hand over to
Thank you,
Andrea.
Massimo. Thank you so much for this. Just a quick question. Is the market listening? How's the market reacting also to your guidelines, actions that you just mentioned?
The market, I must say, is very sensitive and receptive to this action that Prysmian is taking. On the one hand, our customers are very enthralled by our decision to invest a significant amount of money to help the energy transition become more sustainable for them. On the other hand, they really appreciate a lot the interaction on the net zero goals. They know that we can help them achieving their targets in terms of CO2 emissions. So I must admit, I was not a super fan of this initiative one year ago. I didn't know much about it, but in the last 6 months, we've seen a significant growth of interest and the real actions happening between us, suppliers, and the customer.
Thanks again. Thank you, Massimo. And we are ready for the second speaker that I'm glad to introduce. And thank you, Massimo. I invite on the stage Fabrizio Ruchman, who's Chief HR Officer here at Prysmian. Welcome, Fabrizio.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Within our journey to become a more sustainable company in the long term, next to our climate ambition a few months ago, as a group, we also announced our 2030 social ambition. What is behind the 2030 social ambition? First of all, it's about the mission statement, how we want to see our company in 2030 in terms of true intention and aspiration to impact society and people, human capital in general terms. Okay, as you can see in this chart, what is behind is, first of all, the commitment of the group in working in partnership with the many local community in which we operate. As you know, we are present with more than 100 industrial facilities, and we made a choice to focus on technical, professional, cultural education within the communities, especially those communities which are in situation of difficulties and poverty, and where we see the possibility to impact, especially to train and prepare the new generation. So, first of all, our local community is the top of priority for our 2030 social ambition. But then it's also about the Prysmian promises to develop everywhere inclusive work environments where people are fully respected for their diverse gender, culture, origin, nationality, ethnicity, ideas, religions, and this is very important also in the future to attract a new generation in our workplaces. Then it's about the Prysmian commitment to accelerate the creation of the development of very qualified workforce. We are in the front of probably an important industrial transformation that is driven by the energy transition. Massimo has touched a few minutes ago that point. And we feel the necessity to prepare very much more than in the past our workforce to become the company more sustainable in the long term. And this is very much also related to the gender equality. We are traditionally a male-driven industry, and we are in a progress to change significantly to grow women in the technical and scientific field where an industrial company is naturally focused. Then the group is also focusing within the social ambition on the so-called digital inclusion. More than 40% of our employees are already millennials, and we expect this number to, with the new generation, to overcome 70-75% by 2030. And you can easily understand how important it is also to close the digital gap. With our shop floor workers, new generation of shop floor workers, that we want to be fully connected without any distinction of our people in terms of category and possibility to be linked to the company overall. Last but not least, this statement of 2030 social ambition is also about safety. Health and safety is a top priority. Is a top priority not only for our direct employees, for the many thousands of employees that are belonging to external contractors and suppliers that daily live with us in our premises. So, as you can see, the Prysmian social ambition has been split in 5 major chapters. Apart from the health and safety, as I mentioned, there is the inclusion and diversity chapter, the digital inclusion, the empowerment of local community, and finally, engagement and upskilling. What we did in order to make this ambition very concrete, and you can see that from the next chart, is the importance of setting targets, very detailed targets, and indicators to measure our ability to put in action specific plans and to measure the progresses. Let's start from the gender equality. As you see, we fixed the 2030 targets in hiring. We want to be a company that every year is able to hire 50-50% with the full equality men and women in our company in the monthly and the early hiring. We want to have by 2030 the 30% of our senior leader women in our company. We want to improve the workforce, the participation of women in the total workforce of the company over the 25%. Today we are at 16-17%. But we also want to neutralize the gender pay gap, equality pay gap by 2030. Today is size in 6 to 7%. We want to bring it to 0. Finally, there is a major program to grow women, young women in STEM disciplines to increase the number of our women in STEM discipline by 500 in this period of time. This is about the gender equality. Then the next step, as you see, in terms of indicator, is very much related to race, ethnicity, inclusion. We are a very global organization, so we want to have a higher representation in our management done by executive and managers coming from less represented nationalities. But we want also to work close to our local community, growing students in STEM disciplines, preparing in those communities the students, girls and boys that have less possibility to be prepared to grow in terms of education in engineering, mathematics, science, and maybe to become also part of our organization in the next future. We want also to continue to help our communities where we are located in terms of schooling, and also helping in terms of nursery within the different places where we are. Another chapter important is, as I said, is about our digital inclusion. We have more than 30,000 employees, of which only a third of them are digitally connected to the company, and we want to reach quite soon the full engagement of all our shop floor workers, adopting platforms that are able to engage all the 100% of our workforce. This is simply the target. In health and safety, as I said before, the idea is to go by 2030 to zero accidents, and not only speaking of direct employees, but the major challenge is also to engage in this very important target also external collaborators that are many in our company. Finally, a major chapter is about human capital development, skilling of our employees. As you see, different indicators have been set from the training, hour of training per capita. We want to achieve 40 hours per year per capita, starting from the less than 20 hours per capita of today. We want to make our people growth within the company more dynamic, with a target of having at least 25% of our desk workers rotating per year. We have to be aware that the new generation wants to have more possibility to grow, especially in the most competitive markets, so we have to become more smarter and faster in developing people in this sense. But we have also other indicators which are very much about the share ownership program. We have already the 35% of our employees which are shareholders. We want to overcome by far the 50% by 2030, and our shareholders so far have been supporting fully us. Finally, there are a couple of indicators which are measuring the level of engagement of our employees. We used to measure every year the level of people engagement, and we want to reach a number close to 80%, while today we are just over the 60% of people considered highly engaged. This is basically, let's say, the overall picture of our social ambition. Is a journey which includes a very short-term target, but also a long-term ambition to make our company very much sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio Ruchman. Thanks for sharing the social ambition here at Prysmian. Just in a nutshell, before we let you go, Fabrizio, you know, we live in a very weird economic moment. They call it the shortage economy, from raw material to logistic capacity, you name it. How about human resources that for companies are so strategic? How do you feel about the market when you have to hire people or to look for the right people for your company?
I think, Andrea, this also in the labor market, we are facing an important phenomenon of shortage, especially in some markets. We see how difficult, how competitive, how strong is the competition to recruit talented people. I can mention the north of Europe, the North America, but also other markets which are very competitive in this moment. So I think people are rightly making some choices, the most qualified people, and the idea to be part of a company which has an important purpose and climate and social ambition, I think can make a great difference to attract the good professional in the future, because people don't want only a salary, a possibility to express their possibility, but also to be part of a company that has a long-term mission to accomplish.
Sustainability makes a difference.
Exactly.
Thanks again, Fabrizio Ruchman, Chief Group HR Officer. Now, we heard from the top management, and from their voices, let's move to the boardroom. Well, a sustainability strategy, to be credible, has to be transformative. And to be transformative, have to be endorsed by the board of directors. Now, what happens here in Prysmian, and what's the view of sustainability inside as a strategic horizon inside Prysmian? And you can already see connected Maria Letizia Mariani, who's independent non-executive director and lead independent director at Prysmian. She's chair of the Sustainability Committee, and she's an external, she's Chief Commercial Officer at Signify. Welcome, Maria Letizia Mariani. It's a pleasure having you. Can you give us the sense of, inside the board, how do you discuss sustainability and what's the vision at the board level?
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, as a board member in the Prysmian Group for more than 6 years now and the chair of the Sustainability Committee, it's really my pleasure to share my experience and my view on what is the strategic role of sustainability in the agenda of the board. Now, let me start with the 3 considerations. The first one is that nowadays it's more and more clear that sustainability is a strategic topic. And as such, it's a core responsibility of the board. The second consideration is that it's also clear that the commitment to sustainability, a real commitment to sustainability, requires bold choices on resource allocation, investment in innovation, business models. And the third point is that a real commitment to sustainability is not only good for the planet, it's also good for the business. It drives competitive advantage in a variety of ways, from capital market to customer preference, to talking about the scarcity economy that you were mentioning before with Fabrizio, to the employee engagement and the talent retention and attraction. So in my view, these 3 points are enough to explain why sustainability is a key responsibility for the board, should play a key role in the board agenda, and also explain why it plays a key role in the agenda of the board of Prysmian. Now, when I look back at my experience in Prysmian, there are a few milestones that are worth mentioning because they contributed to create a strong acceleration that is clearly now visible, especially in the past 3 years, let's say. Now, the first important milestone is in 2018, when sustainability was for the first time connected to the short-term remuneration. Many things happened then in 2020 when it was established the first for the first time, a dedicated sustainability committee. Now, why a dedicated sustainability committee is important? For me, it's important because it drives focus, it drives knowledge, it drives attention, and through that, it helps to put sustainability higher in the agenda of the board. It creates a better understanding of the processes, of the investment, of the execution that is needed to drive the agenda, on the transparency that is needed on reporting. And in the same way of other committees, the Committee on Sustainability reports constantly to the board so that the full board is exposed to the topic and can support, drive decision, and challenge when it's needed. The second thing that happened in 2020 that is another milestone is that the acknowledgement that to support, to stimulate the company and the journey in the company, it's needed to have knowledge also at the board level. So that's the reason why in 2020, the board skill matrix was updated and sustainability was included in the top skills. That happened before the renewal of the board. And now the board is clearly represented by people that have, in a variety of ways, in terms of soft and hard skill, experience, and the best practice knowledge, they bring a contribution that is relevant on the progress for the sustainability agenda of the company and the acceleration of the social plan. And the third element that was a breakthrough in 2020 is the inclusion of ESG target in the long-term incentive plan. So again, the connection of the goals and the ambition into the measure of the executive of the company. And then we move in 2021 when there are other big acceleration that has been driven in Prysmian. The first one is the official launch of the climate ambition with the science-based target that has been approved in September to achieve the net zero scope for scope 1 and 2, the net zero target. So big achievement, science-based target, commitment that is now ratified and is driving the action plan that is executed by the company. Of course, in that project, there was a strong support by the board and by the committee itself. At the same time, there was also the formalization of the launch and the formalization of the social ambition plan. And here you see the increased focus on topics that are related to the equal pay, the STEM career, the health and safety topics. So there is really a comprehensive focus on social ambition that is structured in a plan that has clear target steps and a plan to execute. And the last element that I want to remark is also the commitment that has been strengthened and publicly confirmed through the participation to the subscription, for example, to the Women Empowerment Principle, the commitment by joining the UN Global Compact. So more and more Prysmian being active and visible and supporting strong environment that try to move the commitment of companies in the right direction. So this acceleration is clearly happening. Is a journey, and as every journey, it has different steps, different milestones. We always look ahead, but there is external recognition that tell us that the journey is visible and also delivering impact. So most recently, at the end of last week, Prysmian has been certified and recognized in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index as a leader for the first time and as a leader in the category. And if you consider that Prysmian joined the ranking only 3 years ago, the progress is really impressive. As I was saying, then the real job is to look ahead. So as a board, we are from one side highly committed to continue to support the executive in delivering on their ambitious target. At the same time, we are also looking at what's next. And of course, there is a big business opportunity that is the energy transition, that is where Prysmian operates and creates value towards customers. There are other elements that are coming up, like taxonomy, like integrated reporting, like the task force on climate-related financial disclosure. So there are many things in our agenda that we will continue to drive. Then the board is also clearly focusing in engaging with stakeholders. The sustainability event in this case is a relevant moment and is a beautiful opportunity to listen to the stakeholders and to get their point of view to secure that we can embed the relevant input in the agenda moving forward. Of course, Prysmian is a public company, and we know that there is a relevant and growing role played by ESG investors. So again, the board, by definition, put a big attention on this topic, and our role is to listen more and more to what are the elements that are relevant for ESG investor, and to secure that we understand, we are aware, and we drive as much as possible the alignment with the strategic priorities that are represented by ESG investors. So in summary, when I look at the role of the board, I see basically 2 different phases. A first phase is to provide help and support to create focus and to secure that sustainability is seen as a strategic element and is connected to the business strategy of the company and the purpose and the vision. Now, when this is done, and this is clearly the case of Prysmian, the role of the board is to continue to challenge and continuously raise the bar to create value through the commitment in sustainability, in climate-related action, in social-related action, in a way that create impact and value for the shareholders, for the employees, and for customers.
All right, thank you so much, Maria Letizia Mariani, for bringing us inside Prysmian boardroom when it comes to sustainability. Thanks again for your work. And again, let's move back to energy transition, which is at the heart of sustainability. And one of the key elements will be more efficient, sustainable, and powerful power transmission grids. That's what we're going to discuss in a second with two very special guests. All right, and now we are ready to talk the future of power transmission grid as a key enabler of a sustainable energy transition. What lies ahead? How's innovation working to make power transmission grids more efficient, more resilient, and first of all, more sustainable? We're ready to discuss this with two guests that I invite to join me on the stage. First of all, Valerio Battista, CEO of Prysmian Group. Welcome, Engineer Battista. Please join me on the stage. And today we're pleased to have Stefano Antonio Donnarumma, CEO of Terna. Please join me on the stage and welcome to you both. Please. So first of all, Stefano Donnarumma, let me introduce Terna, who plays a key role in the Italian electricity system. As the transmission system operator, you've got a national role also in planning the future development of the grid. So how do you look at the future? And you're in a privileged situation to anticipate change, to understand what lies ahead. But also you have a new strategic plan, 21 to 2025. And so what's your vision and the technological challenges you're facing?
Thank you for your question. It's a really important period, this, for the energy transition. And Terna is in the center of this game. Let me say that our plan is not only focused on the next 4 or 5 years, but is a 10 years national plan that provides more than 18 billion euro of investments. And these investments are focused to guarantee the evolution of the system, to guarantee the connection of all the new plants of energy produced by solar and wind. And you have to consider that Italy is a country that is characterized by the production of energy in the south and use of energy in the north. So our main role is to guarantee the transfer of this energy from the south to the north, but also by connecting the great island that in Italy we have. And specifically, a lot of these important projects are focused on how to make more robust the network, more able to also to solve problems coming from the environmental condition. The resiliency of the system is one of the most important topics for us. Most important projects are, for example, the Tyrrhenian Link and the Adriatic Link. These projects are related to the connection of the south of Italy with Sicily and Sardinia, is a Tyrrhenian Link, to create a corridor, an energy corridor in this part of Italy. But also, it's important to consider that Sicily will be connected with the north of Africa. And with this kind of corridor, it's possible to provide that the energy produced in the north of Africa, maybe with solar panels, will arrive to the north of Italy and maybe also in Europe. Italy is connected not only with Austria, with French, but also with the Balkans and also with Greece. And it's important because Italy has a position, a geographical position, our nation, that may allow our nation to be like an energy hub in the center of the Mediterranean. So which are the most important technological solutions that we have to find? But first of all, the submarine cables are really important for us. A great part of our plan, the 5 years plan, is focused on this. Think that only just the Tyrrhenian link has a total cost of 3.7 billion, and inside the plan is 1.8, 1.9 billion. And we have also the Adriatic link, but we have also other connections like SAPEI and others that are undersea connection. And then also important the technology for manage the network during with a resilience approach. So IoT and IG technology, digital technological application.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Engineer Battista, I know that you're used to dialogue because Prysmian Group is one of the main partners of Terna development. And how do you respond, how do you address the need for development and innovation in the future of the grids?
Thank you for the question. Let's start talking about the role of power transmission infrastructures in the energy transition. As we know, the power generated by renewable energy is generated frequently far from the consumption areas. And that's the main problem we have to solve. How to move gigawatts from where is produced, solar or wind doesn't change a lot, and to vehiculate through the network, robust and very powerful network, towards the center of consumption. It's the same problem everywhere in the world. That's why larger, smarter, and more reliable grid infrastructures are strategic for the energy transition to ensure efficient transmission of power supplies to the areas of consumption. As a consequence, also power interconnectors enabling energy exchanges between countries are needed and contribute to the creation of a single European grid. What we are seeing at Prysmian Group is that the demand for cables, mostly high-tech cables, is growing, and is growing in parallel with the ongoing increase of the offshore and wind power capacity. Just to mention a source, Goldman Sachs estimates that offshore wind power will be multiplied by 10, from 27 gigawatt to 200 and more gigawatt. As a result, the demand for cables for offshore wind farms and interconnectors expected to grow from 2.5 billion euro per year to 7 billion euro per year for the time being, but maybe not the top in the next years. We are committed to support the needs for new power transmission infrastructure by developing cable systems with higher transmission capacity over longer distances, operating at higher voltages, and capable to be installed at higher submarine depth. Our innovative P-laser cable technology can now reach 525 kilovolt, operating tension, and our extruded XLPE cable solution for DC application is currently rated at 600 kilovolt. We are working on further development to reach higher power transmittable with a single cable. And today, a line can transmit 2 gigawatt, but we expect in the next years to be able to run over 3 gigawatt. For submarine cable, we are setting new depth record of up 3,000 meters below the sea level by replacing the traditional steel armor with innovative aramaic wire materials. Terna's Tyrrhenian link, for instance, will reach a depth of more than 2,000 meters, 2,400 roughly. demonstrating how our developments are critical to support such large-scale projects. Overall, we are increasing our capex to 350 million euros per year in order to boost our capacity and technology development. Just to mention, we are investing 80 million euros for submarine cable plant in Arco Felice for the production and a new R&D capacity. In the United States, we have recently announced a 100 million euro investment for power cable plant and an 80 million euro investment in our fiber optic plant. We are also taking into consideration the construction of new submarine cable plant in US. That's because the US market is really taking off. In addition, R&D expense amounts to around over 100 million euro per year. One of our most recent investments in the new Leonardo Da Vinci cable laying vessel, which has delivered in August and is already in service, laying at the moment the Viking Link, the UK-Denmark connection.
Now, Stefano Donnarumma, let me move, thank you, Valerio Battista, to a more global perspective, because the challenge to make power transmission grids more sustainable is international. So when you compare the Italian grids with other European or international grids, where do we stand? And in terms of international connectivity, what's the effort and what are you working on?
But first of all, I think it's important to clarify that just now, while we are speaking, the international network in Europe is like only one network. We are just managing our network together with the other TSO in Europe. Just to give you a sample, in the beginning of this year, we had the problem not with Italy. We had the problem in this network coming from the east of Europe. There was a changement of the frequency, and it was really dangerous for all the functioning of the network in Europe. But when this wave arrived to Italy, Italian TSO, together with the French TSO, in less than 1 second, were able, by applying a defense system that we have, to avoid that in Italy there was a problem, and to avoid also that this kind of a problem may arrive to the rest of Europe. This is a sample to understand how just now we are working all together. The technology is a technology that allows all the TSOs to give answers and to have a response also for criticity and dangers for the network. In any case, Italy is so particular, is so different, because Italy, like we said before, is a long country. And it's special because we are a long country with a different position of production and consumption, and also with the different climate conditions, strong climate conditions during the summer in some areas and strong during the winter in other areas. So our experience to manage a network in Italy is really important also in the international approach. Other countries now are experimented something similar. Think about the Germany network. It was not in the past a longitudinal network, because now they are building a network to go from the North Sea to the south of Germany to use this beautiful project for wind in the north. But never in the past they had this kind of problem. And now this is also an opportunity. They have to invest a lot of billion in network to do this. And in other countries is beginning such a process. So our cooperation at the international level is really important, and the exchange of experiences also. In fact, we have some organization, European and also worldwide, with the other TSOs. Another interesting, I think, history will go on in USA. As we see, USA now has established a new plan with a lot of investments for electrification and new kind of sources, and also in USA, they have not a great experience in transmission because they didn't need in the past. Now, also in USA will start a new approach, and I think that this kind of technology and of experience and knowledge that we have may be also useful in the future. Also, together some other partners, like also Prysmian may be, and some other important company may be.
Well, the global perspective is always more and more relevant. And Valerio Battista, you just mentioned some international investments and projects from Prysmian, but I know you're working on some milestone projects, like the Viking, which is the longest ever connection, submarine connection between the UK and Denmark, but it's also the link in the US, so green, or the German corridors. But looking back at the past and how the characteristic of the new power transmission grids look like, looking at the future, and what kind of experience are you bringing also to partners like Sterna?
Okay, Prysmian is working in global milestone projects, such as Viking Link, between the connection between UK and Denmark for 700 kilometers, that just in case Leonardo Da Vinci is laying down in the sea just now, as we speak. Is the longest interconnector, submarine interconnector. Or the So Green, the project you were talking about before. So Green is an HVDC link that is going to connect the Midwest to the Chicago area, to the East Coast of US. The innovative solution for the So Green is the utilization of the right-of-way of the railway in US. Because in US does not exist a real transmission network. Similarly to Germany, in Germany as well as in US, the historical network is built around the power station. And the power station generate the electricity. This electricity is distributed around the area via the high voltage connection. Now the paradigm is changing because the source of energy is located where the renewable energy is generated, not anymore by the fossil fuel generation. So the result is that the power comes from locations that are very far from the utilization, sometimes thousands of kilometers or dozens of hundreds of kilometers. So the transmission system is extremely important and is extremely poor in certain countries like Germany and US, where the historical network has been built around the power stations. So we have to change the mentality. We have to be able to modify our way of transmitting energy to satisfy the need of the population. The ability of reaching greater installation depths in conjunction with the commitment to deliver more sustainability is driving our innovation development towards cables that are made of lighter and more environmentally friendly materials. Another of our commitment is to help our customer to reduce their CapEx and network management costs. Today, our lines, transmission lines, have reached 525 kilovolt, with the exception of Western Link that has been set at 600 kilovolt. What's next? Today, bipole is able to transmit 2 gigawatt, what's next? 3 gigawatts, 4 gigawatts. That's something we have to identify and agree with our customers, with the TSO. That's the role. In installations, our customers' company are looking for new solutions and alternative routes allowing to use existing infrastructure, as in the So Green, where I said we are installing in existing railroad right away. That's in order to not to create environmental issue and community impact. Another increasing trend is the full turnkey approach, because that's require a simpler way of doing or realizing the link by our customer. In the US, just recently, we have won the Dominion project. The Dominion project is a project on the east coast of US for Dominion Energy, and has been awarded to us on the basis of a balance of plant. What does it mean? It means that we, with our partner DEME, is a construction company, US construction company, we take the full responsibility of the execution of the project, including the installation of the turbines and including all the electrical networks to bring the power to shore. And that's a very important project that we have been awarded 1 week ago, 10 days ago, of which we are very, very satisfied. Is the first very big project. The first, in reality, we have been awarded to, and has been the project in, the project in the south of the East Coast. That is more on the east, but is definitely bigger. Is the biggest never realized, going to be realized in US.
All right, Valerio Battista, thanks for giving this overview of your international experience, and also to Stefano Donnarumma for giving the vision and the strategy of Terna in making power transmission grid more sustainable, looking at the future. We understand there's a radical transformation underway, and also given the time frame and the need of acceleration and speed, there's more innovation to come in the next few years. So thanks again. You can leave the stage because we are ready to go with the next segment of our Sustainability Day in just a few seconds. Well, we just heard about the future of power transmission grids. But now let's change the sector with Philippe Van Hiel, who's Prysmian Group Executive Vice President of the Telecom Division. I invite Philippe to join me on the stage for his presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We are at the threshold of two massive transformations: energy transition and digitalization. One of our main tasks is to prepare the network for welcoming and supporting the many waves of new technologies that we see coming towards us. And the optical technologies have a key role to play in enabling this. I see 3 chapters to describe the optical technology contribution to these transformations. The first one is about digitalization itself. Digitalization leads us to smart concepts, so-called smart concepts. We all heard about smart grid, smart city, smart building, smart factory. And these concepts that are emerging very quickly are all based on 2 things. First, sensors. We want to measure something. And then we want to treat the information that this sensor has captured. None of that is possible without optical fiber. for two reasons. First, because the optical fiber is very often the sensor itself. Optical fiber is sensitive to pressure, to temperature, even to noise. And it's clear that we need optical fiber to play the role of the sensor in a smart grid, for instance. But also, the optical fiber is, of course, the way to convey the information to the computer that will analyze and achieve the computation of all the data that we need to analyze to become smarter in a system. So that's the first contribution of optical technology. It's a key enabler for smart whatever it can be. The second chapter is about the energy consumption itself. Because of all the ways that are, all the technologies that are existing to achieve connectivity between homes, antennas, factories, businesses, hospitals, in the near future, even cars, automated cars, optical fiber is the less consuming of all technologies. So every time we have the opportunity to convert a previous technology, like, let me mention a few of them, DOCSIS on coax cables that we all had in our homes for a while, or VDSL, XDSL technologies. When we convert these technologies into a pure fiber-based technology, we automatically, systematically save energy. That's the second chapter of the contribution of the optical technology. And of course, there is a third chapter, which is about how to connect. Because when we say we need more connectivity to achieve the digitalization of the world, it's obvious that we want to connect all the homes, all the antennas, and all the businesses, all the devices of the world in the end will have to be connected with fiber. It means that we need to build an extremely high density network of fiber around the world that will have to reach in the end each and every point of activity, of presence of any activity in the world. And there are many ways to do this. Our contribution to this as a producer of optical fiber and cables is to dedicate a lot of our R&D, research and development efforts into making more with less, basically. And that's been our essential guideline in the last 15 to 20 years. What does it mean for a cable maker like us? It means that we make products that are always smaller, that are always more robust, and that are always easier to install. This is a key enabler for making the networks that they are going to be installed in of a higher fiber density, of it cheaper to build, and also greener in the end. Because when we achieve all these improvements in our product base, in reality, we make the network lasting longer, being more future-proof, and being much more sustainable in all ways, cheaper to build, using less transport, using less packaging, and enabling easier and faster installation, which is usually one of the key bottlenecks in building a network. It's clear that the optical technology contribution to digitalization and to energy transition is important. It's one of the building blocks of making the world of tomorrow more sustainable. And it's a reason for Prysmian to keep on investing in this, because it's the perfect complement to what Prysmian does also on the energy product side of things. So it's inevitable that we need more optical. technologies everywhere, and it's inevitable that we need to further penetrate with optical fibers everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe, so much. Just let me ask you a quick question, because I think that listening to you, we can assume that the two transition, digital and sustainability, ecological transition, goes together. They are kind of twin transition, as they call it. But given the national recovery and resilience plans, not just in Italy and Europe, but all over the world, we see huge investments and trillions of investments. Do you think that this will spur demand in your sector and enhance the demand for this kind of fiber you were mentioning?
It's already ongoing. We've been through 2 years of stabilization or even slowdown in certain regions in our optical markets, but now it's clear. The trend is up, and I hope it will last because we need that. I think the world needs that, and Prysmian will take its share of it, I'm sure.
So you are in the position to match the huge demand which is incoming in the market.
We are not only in the position to match the demand, because we are also investing into increasing our capacity, also in the optical segment in Prysmian, but we are at the real forefront of the best technologies to help sustainability and to make things smarter. So yes, we are in.
Philippe Vanille, thank you so much to the Executive Vice President of the Telecom Division at Prysmian. And now we are ready to turn the page and assume a completely different point of view. Now, I would like Maria Cristina Bifulco to join me again on the stage, because we have to discuss with a couple of external guests that I know she knows very well. So welcome, we can take a seat, because now we want to discuss how the market look at what we've been discussing so far, so how sustainability is seen by investors. And I introduce our guest, Craig Cameron, his portfolio manager at Franklin Templeton. Welcome also to Anne-Claire Imperial, who's co-head of research ESG at Sycomore Asset Management. Welcome you both, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Well, Maria Cristina, why is it so important to listen to these guys that looks day in, day out at what you're doing in the company?
They are an extremely important stakeholders as shareholders of Prysmian. The dialogue, the continuous dialogue with our investors is essential for defining, to make sure that we are aligned in terms, to align expectations on what we do with what investors expect from us. And investors have been playing a key role in our journey. They've been identifying priorities. So I thank you, Craig, and thank you, Anne-Marie, for the extremely important role they play in our company.
Well, let me start with Craig Cameron, because Maria Cristina just said you are in a constant dialogue with the companies you're investing or not investing in. How relevant it is ESG in your conversation, and more specifically, the environmental part of the action that this company takes today?
Yeah, so I think ESG as a sort of factor is something that's really got a lot of attention recently from an investment standpoint, and a lot of people like to put it in its own separate box when it comes to thinking about or analyzing companies. But I think in its simplest form, ESG analysis is just doing good business analysis. It's thinking about long-term issues, and it's considering risks that are perhaps coming from factors that are not just about industry dynamics or a sort of very narrow focus on a company. So I think ESG factors are very important. I think it's something that really always has been important, and it really helps you to build a bigger picture of a company. You can think about its dynamics and how it interacts with various stakeholders. When it comes to our focus specifically on environmental issues and climate change, it is something we really try and focus on, but we're just trying to understand two things. The first is how a company is actually tackling the environmental issues that are present in its own business, its own carbon footprint, but also how the company can benefit from the transition to a low carbon economy. And I think Prysmian is a great example of a company that fits both of those very well.
Well, Anne-Claire Imperial, the claim of Sycomore is human is capital. It's not just talking HR, we are talking also sustainability and social impact of investments. So what's the space in the equation that drives you to decide to invest or not of the social implication of the company behavior and strategy?
Yeah, when it comes to sustainability, so at Sycomore we have, of course, a 360 approach. So our objective towards our sustainability analysis is really to have this 360 view of a given company. And when it comes more specifically to social and societal aspects, I would say that we have a really strong focus, as you said, on human capital. So it's really important for us to make sure that we know how and we understand how the company is integrating human capital aspects into its strategy, since we are convinced that with people that are empowered, employees that know exactly why they are working for this company, what is the mission of the company, and what are we expecting from them on a day-to-day basis. We are really convinced, and we have seen with our experience as an asset manager as well, that it gives performance on the long run. And the second aspect we will look at when it comes to societal aspect is also the product and services that the company is delivering. Are these products delivering any positive contribution to the societal challenges that we're facing now? So when it comes to Prysmian, for example, we do have these positive contributions through the fact that the company is enabling the access to energy for all, and also access to telecommunication for all. So that's going to be also some of the key areas we will focus on when doing an investment decision.
Well, and Claire, that's very interesting, but I've got a point for you, which is very delicate. And as we report on all of this, the sustainability trends, it's really tough. And it's, how do you measure sustainability? How do you measure social impact? You know, how can you make evaluation if you do not start with measurement? Craig, Cameron, what do you make of this when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, I would say that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
Answer for me if you prefer. But yeah. No, I mean, when it comes to environmental things, I think the first thing that we're looking for from a company is the sort of just an understanding of the environmental challenges that they face. You know, realizing how the business might be impacted by climate change in its operations, and also the opportunities in its end markets. And I think when we start to sort of think about measurement, really it's a real focus around carbon emissions. It's things like the carbon intensity. We're looking at whether a company is signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, and really measuring and tracking that over time. So you know, it's the focus on environmental issues for sure, and we also try and do things like you know, track progress towards water targets and waste and recycling as well. So we're lucky in that sense. I think that environmental metrics are something that are readily trackable, and I think the sort of information, while it perhaps lacks some standardization today, it is definitely getting better. Yeah. And that's something we you know, really focus on in dialogue with our companies as well.
Yeah, lack of standard is a big problem. Also, central banks are discussing, and during the Italian G20, there was a group working on what they call the data gap, which is really relevant. And Claire, now it's your turn to answer.
So when it comes to, well, we do have also a metric on the environmental part, but I understand I should focus on social and societal here. And well, the way we measure, I mean, of course, when it comes to social issue, there are many things that are qualitative. So the way we approach the subject is really to have a clear knowledge of the company. So we go on site. We have done a site visit at Prysmian actually in the past. So we do on site, we have this dialogue with the company to make sure we understand and we can feel how the strategy of the company and its human capital approach, how is it really implemented. And of course, we look at results. So we're going to look at the results when it comes to health and safety. And we also, when it comes to human capital and how each employee is feeling about the company and its human capital approach, we look at the engagement rate of companies. And we also look at the, outside metrics. So for example, we look at Glassdoor. So sometimes many employees actually use Glassdoor as a platform to express their opinion on their company. So as soon as we have, relevant information and enough feedback on the company, it can also help us making our own analysis. And when it comes to the societal contribution of the product and services, we will really split the different segments the company is doing and look at each segment at which end markets these products are used for. So and with these end markets, we have assessed for each end markets if they are contributing to some priorities identified by the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So that's how we will also try to assess with an external a framework that the SDGs are to make sure that we focus on the right priorities when it comes to societal aspects.
Well, that's right. But Craig, let me get back to you, because sustainability takes investments, huge investment now. And how do you trade off, how do you match short-term performance of companies with long-term engagement and investments that will pay just in the long term? Because everyone is talking long term, but we do report on a minute by minute by the market, and we see the reaction on quarterly results that still matter a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, quarterly results are a good temperature check and an ability for a company to show progress along the way. But I think that the focus on factors like ESG and sort of environmental and social issues are long-term issues, and they are drivers of long-term outperformance. As long-term investors, we don't want to be buying a different company for every single quarter. You want to take a long-term view and consistently, see a company perform well. And so I think a focus on ESG is actually a focus on the long term. A focus on environmental issues is about primarily climate change, which is not something that's going to fade away in the next 2 quarters or 3 quarters. This is something that will impact a company for a decade or more. And I think what Anne-Claire was saying about sort of employee engagement as well, that's something that a company can sort of invest in the short term, and it might even appear like a cost. But when you get that loyalty and that sort of extra drive and productivity from a workforce, it really pays off in the long term. So I think this sort of focus on ESG factors is helping investors to shift to a more long-term focus, and that should be better for company productivity and performance, particularly for those companies that are focused on these factors.
And Claire?
Yes, I totally agree. And maybe to give also an example when it comes to short term, for sure. The promise that we give to our clients is actually that the fact that we are a long-term investor. So this is our spirit, and this is in the spirit in which we invest in companies. And then when we say that there are conflicts between these long-term trends and short-term trends, it's not always the case. If we take the example of the sanitary crisis. Well, in the short term, some companies might have cut some jobs, and 1 year later, when the demand is here again, some companies have some difficulties to hire new competence, and actually they don't have the right skill as the market is coming back. So 1 year is quite short term, and it can have really a negative impact then on the company to have cut those jobs on a very short term view during the sanitary crisis, Whereas just afterwards, there is this need for a continuous business with key talents. So it is key to invest on the long run on talents as well to make sure that the company remains productive even in the short term, I would say.
Well, so I'm not going to ask you lastly your consensus on year-end results or Q1 forecast, but I'd like to understand what do you expect from an ESG perspective from Prysmian looking at the future? Craig.
Yeah, so the first thing that I mentioned was that sort of demonstrating and understanding. And I think absolutely Prysmian is on top of that. It's not only tackling its own carbon footprint, but also thinking about how it can position the business to benefit from the transition to a low carbon economy. And that for us is a company that just understands the opportunity. I think secondly, it's about being ambitious in what you can achieve. Setting, long-term sort of net zero targets and setting that as a stretch goal, but also having those shorter-term, more closely defined targets with actions required to get there along the way. And lastly, it's just about execution. So tying executive compensation to ESG factors, which is something that I know Prysmian has done and raised recently as well. Doing things like setting an internal carbon price to help sort of manage the financial impact and invest most efficiently in decarbonization, and really just putting those investments into place to pay off over the long term, I think is really the whole package, and that's what we're looking for, certainly as environmentally focused investors.
And Claire Imperial?
Yes, well, I'd like to talk about the program of Prysmian on diversity and inclusion. So Prysmian has done a great job on this program and on this topic, which is a very challenging issue when it comes to Prysmian industry. And maybe one key aspect that we highlight when we had those dialogues and those information on this program is that the company has set some key some KPIs in all managers' remuneration on these targets on diversity and inclusion, and that's actually a very important aspect for this program to be successful. So now we are just expecting for the results to come after those action plans that is very challenging for Prysmian. And secondly, when it comes to societal aspects, one thing that we would find interesting is how Prysmian also may be able to prioritize or explore new geography according to its impact on the fact that some population doesn't have access to telecommunication or to energy, and so how also Prysmian work within its own value chain to also foster its impact on societal issues.
Well, Maria Cristina Bifulco, it was not a buy rating, but I think it was a benign valuation of the company. How do you feel about that, and how do you reply to all that you listen?
I am overwhelmed. Being in constantly talk with our investors, of course, gives us the direction. And we try to incorporate this feedback. For us, it's extremely relevant, and so it's overwhelming. It's also rewarding, but from our perspective, it's also a challenge because we need to make sure that we continue to meet Craig and Claire expectations and all our investors' expectations, trying to implement. The challenge for an industrial company, also a passionate company as Prysmian, is to translate KPIs and ambitions into concrete actions in all the countries, in all the regions, in all the functions. So for us, the voice of Craig, the voice of Claire is extremely important. It's important for me, it's important for the top management, it's important for the board of directors. So I thank you again, Craig and Claire.
Yeah, it's an incredible pressure, but it's a great stimulus for companies. Thanks again, Craig Cameron and Claire Imperial. Thanks for your time.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are ready to turn the page because we are going to bring the discussion global. So, how do Prysmian implement its ESG strategy worldwide in different regions, different countries and continents with different culture and business practices? Again, with me on the stage, Maria Cristina Bifulco, but I want to introduce the speakers that you already see on the screen. So Juan Mogollon, who's CEO of Latin America for Prysmian Group. Hello and welcome also to Ulku Hotzkan, who's CEO of Turkey for Prysmian Group, and Saskia Verkamp, who's North America CFO for Prysmian Group. Welcome everyone, thanks for your time. Glad to have such a comprehensive and global perspective around the virtual table. And before moving to the best practices and initiatives that are underway in your respective region, I would like to ask you a question which was a little bit more broad on, the energy transition, the perception of what's happening, especially after COP26. Starting from the US, Sasha Verkamp, we know that President Biden has just signed a 1.2 trillion infrastructure investment plan that will directly affect also renewables, energy, water, electricity, and all of that kind of stuff. But what's the real sentiment when it comes to sustainability from business leaders and the public opinion over there?
Okay, thank you, Andrea. First of all, thank you for inviting me for the Sustainability Day. But immediately going to your question, maybe first of all, it's interesting to see the scale and the speed in the US, what is happening in the energy transformation process. As you might know, we have seen the last 2 weeks the approval of the infrastructure bill by the Congress. This is really giving a big boost to the transformation, which was also already underway. You see, in general, the world is waking up, but also the Americans realize the urgency that something needs to be done, and especially to address the climate change. Everyone is kind of conscious that something is happening and something needs to be done. But you're asking me, okay, what are corporations doing? What is happening with the companies? And from a Prysmian North America perspective, I recognize that the leadership sees a critical opportunity and sees that there can be an enabler in this transition and be a leader also to modernize this US energy infrastructure. Very interesting to see that we have seen the last 6 months quite some major developments and major projects announced, which will shape also the energy grid for the future using solar and power, wind, especially for these projects. One of a remarkable project is the So Green, a high voltage direct current link, which is a clean energy grid across the Midwest. Another major project that was awarded to North America a while ago is the Vineyard project, which is off the coast of Massachusetts. This project just started the execution. So it's a very remarkable process. But just also last week, even another major project was announced, and that's the Dominion Energy offshore of the Virginia coast. This is one of the biggest submarine cable projects in the US ever. So these are some of the examples what is happening and what Prysmian is really being an enabler of this whole transition process. We realize transition to the clean energy is the way to get decarbonize the region. And we work very close with our suppliers and customers and recognize that we need more wind and also power. But of course, these developments brings also challenges to the grid, because the grid is using more power and solar, and these technologies need more, need really their resilience to the natural disasters. What happened in the US, for example, last year, the bushfires in California, but also the beginning of this year, the power outage in Texas. So we need to make sure that the grid be resilient.
Yeah.
Just lastly, Mark, what I would like to see, what I would like to mention is that North America has taken bold steps to invest in this energy transition. In the energy business, we see the investment, approximately 100 million in high voltage and medium voltage to upgrade the capacity and fulfill the demand. So overall, summarized, in North America, we work towards a sustainable strategy, working with our suppliers and our customers in an environmental but also economical way to fulfill a sustainable strategy. But lots of things happening in this continent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this, Saskia Verskamp. Now, let's move from North America to South America with Juan Mogollon. And, you know, there are different sensitivity and political stances on what we just heard. I was at G20 in Rome, where President Bolsonaro stated and stressed the fact that Brazil is asking for its fair share of development. And when it comes to sustainability, the position of not just Brazil, but also other emerging countries is that first, we have to fight against poverty and develop the economy, and then it will come to sustainability. What's your sense, and how's the match between economic growth and sustainability?
Very good. Good question, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see you again, okay? So let me, just to address your question properly, let me provide a little bit of perspective, then I'll get to your, to your question specifically. You know, look, Latin America is a continent with over 30 countries, and with a very wide range in the economic development of every country, and consequently on the energy transition. So first of all, there is not a unified Latin America policy response to climate change. So in order to address that point in a fair manner, we almost have to refer to different packs of countries, you know, which are at different stages of economic development. So if we start from the top, let's just say at the top of the pack, we have countries like Chile, Peru, and Costa Rica, which have continued to lead the way on the sustainable initiatives. You know, a good example of that, I'm gonna come back to your question in just a second, but let me start with the best of the pack. So a good example of that, of countries that lead the way in Latin America, is for instance Chile, which in the last decade, all the new energy capacity that has been added is coming from renewable sources of energy. As a matter of fact, as of now, Chile produces 53% of their energy from renewable sources, leading the way not only in Latin America, but globally, okay? Part of that, back to my point about economic development, is the fact that Chile is a great destination for foreign direct investment because of the political stability, to your point, by the way. But also geographically, in the northern part of Chile, there is a vast desert, which makes it a perfect geography for solar energy generation. And then we go to the middle of the pack, or the bottom of the pack, which are some of the countries that you referred to, which, to your point, they see, some of them see environmental protection in conflict with economic growth. Obviously, because many of these countries possess natural resources, which provide employment and foreign income, such as agriculture, and mining, fossil fuels, and a few others. Unfortunately, those are the very same resources that produce CO2 when it's not done properly. And that's where technology comes. And to address your point specifically, for instance, in Brazil, recently we have seen the addition of land for mining exploration. Also recently we saw the market open to the market of natural gas was open to private companies. Both of these initiatives are facing significant criticism by environmental institutions. But to be fair, we have also seen Brazil make some great moves in preserving the forest. And Brazil continues to be a major destination for foreign direct investment, specifically in renewable sources of energy. So I think there is still a lot of ambiguity in regards to how Brazil is tackling that, the topic of sustainability. I think another good example to your point is Mexico, which unfortunately we have seen the government take multiple steps in the last couple of years to prioritize oil and fossil fuel over renewable sources of energy. So to grasp your question, I think that's where corporations like Prism make a big difference, because that's where we become enablers through technology and products and collaborating with the local communities to align the political agenda with initiatives on sustainability. Yeah. Did I address your question, Andrea?
Yeah, absolutely, Juan. Thanks for that. These are matters that are discussed globally, you know, from India to China to all the developing economies, and it's crucial that there are steps ahead in that direction. But let me move also to Ulko Özkan, because Turkey has such an incredible geostrategic relevance with its position between Asia and Europe, but when it comes to the energy transition, when it comes also to more delicate questions like the D&I that we've been also discussing during our Sustainability Day, what's the position in the country? What's your experience based on what you do in your work?
Thank you very much, Andrea. And I'm very glad to be here all together with you. And thank you for this question also. Let me start with equality, because equality has one of the most critical subjects discussed all over the world in this century. Reducing inequalities in the business life and daily life is the biggest challenge while working towards the age of sustainable development. Climate crisis is also worsening the inequality multidimensionally. Disadvantaged groups like poor people, women, and girls are at the frontiers and are struggling for survival. Despite its critical importance, social equality has not been resolved or improving until now. On the contrary, the gap between the privileged and the rest has been widening. United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are primarily around reversing all forms of conditions to tackle this inequality. Access to clean and affordable energy is a basic right. In this sense, we have to make sure that everyone has the chance and infrastructure to access to clean energy. As you have pointed out, Turkey has a critical geographical position between Europe and Asia. Turkey is one of the countries that is hosting the largest number of temporary refugees from different countries. Thinking about their long-term needs, we should talk about to design a system that gives them access to education, healthcare, social services, and labor markets, especially in the business life, in order to reduce this inequality for these people, especially women and girls. On the other hand, Turkey is also working to create an energy transition strategy, as you said. Turkey's top policy priority is to secure its energy supply and keep up with the demand to sustain the economical growth as the population is also increasing. Being a border country between Europe and Asia, Turkey has a critical role in both transition from fossil fuel usage to renewable energy and being an important bridge in energy transmission between Europe and Asia. That I can say these words and I can share your question.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Just let me move quickly to the second round of questions, which is more specifically dedicated to your main priorities and action when it comes to sustainability practices, projects that are underway in your country. Let me get back to Saskia Verkamp.
Okay, what I would say on the North America side, what I see on a more pragmatic scenario is that we have a very active steering committee. So there's a committee what assigned different groups who are working towards specific projects. So specific projects are defined to achieve certain targets on sustainability. And one of these is, for example, the installation of LED lighting across all the factories in North America. What makes a big impact, of course, one hand on the uses of energy, but also on the other hand, on the topic of safety because of the lighting, what has been discussed quite intensively within Prysmian as well. What we also see is looking at areas where we can use more efficient our raw materials. So that is also across the board in the facilities, and project teams are working on this. Also, other interesting examples are working with customers and suppliers. So one hand, we work with a supplier to look at how is the whole sourcing of the supply chain? How can we label the whole supply chain, making sure that they recognize it's from a sustainable source? So that's working very closely with our suppliers. And on the other side, also projects like recycling of reels. And here I talk about steel reels because we know the steel is very short in the market. So what can we do to recycle the reels? Within Prism, we have the Alasia program. So we're working with customers to see what opportunities we have to start using this more and more to save transportation costs, but definitely also the usage of steel. So these are a bit more pragmatic items from a environmental sustainability side. And on the other area, we have the human resource area where we target on social commitment, social targets, looking at adoption, support, parental support. So quite specific areas where we're working on in operational, but also in HR So looking at the environment and also at the social ambition plans.
Absolutely, that's very factual and concrete. Thanks for that, Saskia. Let me get back to Juan and what's going on in Latin America from this perspective.
Sure, Andrea. Well, first of all, look, Prysmian has been in Latin America for almost 100 years. We have over 4,000 employees. We have a footprint of manufacturing in 9 countries. So it's hard to stay around for so long unless you're a good corporate citizen. And the company has always been a great corporate citizen in Latin America. But in regards to your question, in terms of what we're doing to be part of this sustainability journey, there are a number of programs, and I will not get into a specific, maybe I'll just mention a few that I'm very proud of being in Latin America. Number one is in regards to the investment that the company continues to make to promote the digitization, bringing quality and fast internet to rural communities, which is still a big issue in countries like Brazil, Mexico, and many other countries. In the last 15 months or 18 months, we invested over $20 million expanding capacity, both in Mexico and in Brazil, to bring fiber optics to local communities. We continue to make investment and bring in technology and the renewable products to continue to support and promote the sources of energy, both from wind and solar. And one that we recently decided to launch, which plays right in my heart being in Latin America, is initiative to support education of underprivileged children in countries where they just wouldn't have another chance. Because this is going to play right in the heart of an endemic social issue in Latin America, which is the social inequality. I think Prysmian being in the front end of closing that gap will make a huge difference in the future as well. That's about the 3 that I could mention, Andrea.
Yeah, fantastic. And Ulku Özkan, what's the situation in Turkey?
Thank you, Andrea. So I would like to share our sustainability journey from Turkish point of view. As being a member of the Prysmian group, we, Turkish Prysmian Kablo, have a strong willingness to be a sustainable company. To achieve these targets, we started our journey in 2020, knowing that sustainability is a journey rather than a destination. We named our sustainability journey as Sign It for a Better Tomorrow. Türk Prysmian Kablo sees that the challenges in business, society, and environment can only be overcome by making sustainability the core of the business philosophy. Executing a strong sustainability plan and making the necessary cultural transformation is also needed. So therefore, we had a planning phase at the very beginning, which has been followed by a second phase in which that sustainability trends are analyzed, vision is defined, impacts are assessed, goals are established, and a detailed plan for sustainability is made. So our intention as Turkish Prysmian is not a standalone initiative. It is aligned with the overall strategy of the Prysmian group. Therefore, I can say that we are committing to produce low polluting products, cutting down on emissions and waste. We also aim to build a zero and beyond culture that integrates safety, health, and well-being at work and beyond. I would like to share that our sustainability vision is to assure innovative energy and telecommunication solutions through a responsible production by pursuing economical, environmental, and social sustainability for all our stakeholders and the planet. We define our sustainability vision under 4 different primary pillars. The first one is eliminating footprint. The second one is circular resource use, and the third one is enhancing business model, and the last pillar is developing employees and the community. And we have developed all KPIs based on these 4 pillars. After the planning phase of our Sign It plan, we had a fast start to achieve our year 2030 targets. I can share you that by energy saving and CO2 reduction projects that we have completed until today, we have reduced our over 800 tons of CO2 until now, and we plan to save further 15,000 tons by 2030. Likewise, we have ongoing projects in our all primary impact areas for all 4 pillars. So I can say that we are committed to achieve all our sustainability targets and we are working hard towards them for all targets that we have defined for our signed plan.
All right, thanks again to all our speakers. And Maria Cristina, it's time to wrap up our incredible Sustainability Day.
Absolutely, Andrea. Thank you. Thank you all for your attention, your interaction. I hope we have been able to share with you how passionate, how serious, how rigorous we are on these topics and how your voice is important. Allow me to thank all of you and also to thank all Prysmian colleagues and especially the communication department that have been supporting us in organizing this event with very passionate focus. Thank you.
Yeah, now it's time for interaction during the workshop, but before we get there, there's a last-minute surprise because we just received a video message from Giancarlo Pedotti. Giancarlo Pedotti is the sailor who's racing the ocean in the Transat Jean Fabre, and let's hear what he has to say to the Prysmian community.
Hello everybody, Giancarlo Pedotti on board of Prysmian Group, here in the middle of the ocean, close to approach the South Hemisphere. And so a little speech to remember you the importance of sustainability, to be responsible and green in our action every day for us and for next generation that will arrive after us. Thank you very much.
All right, Maria Cristina, now it's really time to make an end.
Unfortunately, I would say.
Okay, but it's not over because today, tomorrow, the workshops are there.
Workshop, yes, on decarbonization and climate change, on social impacts, and on the innovation.
All right, so thank you so much. Thanks again for listening, and have a good continuation with the workshops.